Uhuru, brothers and sisters and comrades. This is Omali Yeshitela. I'm chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. I'm leader of the Uhuru movement and the African Revolution. I would like to really appreciate all of you for coming in to this discussion on today. I assume that what's on the mind of most of you is the chaos, the tensions, the crisis revolving around this election. Even as we have in this discussion, people sitting on pins and needles with declaration coming from various forces that the race is too close to call right now. Although there seems to be indications that some of the swing states, Wisconsin in particular, is either leaning toward Biden or will result in Biden's capture. The thing is, however, even leading up to this point, throughout the weeks and certainly a few of the months prior to the election, there was a tremendous amount of anxiety that was heaped upon the people in this country and in some ways the peoples of the world. Anxiety is revolving around the threat of pending violence, the fact that there has not appeared to be any violence that occurred during the actual elections, during the polling places is surprising based on what was being predicted, not only by some of the political pundits, but even sectors of the security, the US colonial state security apparatus, all of whom were predicting violence. And some, of course, that's not over yet because there has not been an actually declared winner of this election for president, US president. We said all along, because it's always been true, that the elections in this country and most of what is considered the so-called democratic West, most of the world, in fact, elections are simply nonviolent contests that occur between different sectors of the ruling class for control of the state apparatus to their own economic advantage, to be able to pursue their economic interests, whether that's on a global scale or whether that's in the community that you live in. That's what elections are. That's what you see, all of this money that they call donors and what have you, they're purchasing these guys who are supposed to be running for office. And this is the way that the different sectors of the ruling class are able to compete with each other, fight with each other, without having to go to blows, without having to send people to war, like they will send people to war and do send people to war when it comes to a contest between American capital and some capital or some other interest abroad. So they don't have to do that in this country because they have this electoral process. So they can compete non-violently. Different sectors of them. They put their money up, they buy their particular politicians, they give them the so-called lobbyists and people who teach them how to talk, how to walk, what to say, and what messages to carry in their own interest. This is how the electoral process works. And so here we are looking at this election, and most people not recognizing that it's a contest between white power, between sectors of white power. And they will use us to their advantage in order to win a victory for themselves. On the Trump side, Trump has succeeded in capturing, clearly capturing the majority of the white population in this country. I assume it's the majority. Let me take that back. It's a huge sector, huge chunk of the white population in this country with a raw, open colonialist message to them, popularizing colonialism in a way that we haven't seen perhaps in this country since the 1950s, when this popularity, this popular white nationalism, this popular anti-African, this popular anti-Mexican, this popular anti-anybody who was not white. We haven't seen this at this extent until now, when it's in the open. Doesn't mean that the anti-white, the anti-African, the anti-Mexican, the anti-people around the world hasn't been there, but it hasn't been popular, hasn't been open for a very long time. And so now what we have is the Republican Party has succeeded through Trump in popularizing this anti-Black, this whole white nationalist colonial politics that's happening right now. So it's really interesting because the race, at least up until a few minutes ago, had not been decided. And that should be something that, that the Biden team should be concerned about, because going into this election, there were all these projections, all these polls, all these statements from pundits about how Trump has violated all the standards of morality and decency and truth and veracity to such a point that he was certainly easily going to be replaced by Biden. That hasn't happened. Which is not to say Biden will not win, but it hasn't happened as easily as it was assumed that he would be winning and Trump would be losing by the pundits. And so that's something that's of some significance. It's of significance that to the extent that unless something has happened in the last couple of minutes, unless the Bidens have different polls, they have a poll, and I'm sure they do have significant polling that we haven't seen, the Biden camp, it seems to me, would be worried because of all of the predictions. And they've seen this before with Hillary Clinton in 2016. All the predictions showed that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then Trump ended up winning it anyway by corralling this white nationalist sentiment that's deeply embedded. That's a part of the whole psyche of the white population in this country. And so Trump was able to corral that and then weaponize it in a way that carried out the interests of a particular sector of the ruling class in this country. So Biden can't be certain, and certainly he couldn't have been a couple of months, up until a couple of minutes ago. But the Africans, we should be concerned, regardless of who wins this election. Because if an election is this close, that's based on white nationalist principles, well, on the one hand, and a weak, timid, tepid kind of response to that on the other hand by the other party. Just think about that. That Trump at least stood for something that mobilized a whole bunch of white people and even won a larger sector of African men than any a Republican has done in a very long time. And so here you have Trump, he stands for something, even if it's kill the niggas, put them all in jail, build walls, kick the Mexicans out because they're rapists, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He stands for something, and that can mobilize a certain sector of the population, while Biden stands for nothing. He couldn't stand for anything. He couldn't stand for Black power. He couldn't stand for Black community control of the police. He couldn't stand for freeing all these Africans in prisons. He couldn't stand for freeing the political prisoners. He couldn't stand for anything. And of course, I know the argument is, well, he couldn't. If he said that, if he said something about Black people, if he said something about the prison, then he couldn't win. And I hear that all the time. And what it means is that, for one thing, what it means is that he's standing for white power, just like Trump is standing for white power. Because if you can't say you stand for Black people, if you live in a country that's based on white nationalism, based on white power, based on an economy that comes into existence through expropriating value from Africans, Mexicans, and all the other people around the world, if you're in that kind of country with millions of, with hundreds of thousands of African people in prison, with political prisoners that have been there for more than 50 years, Black people, if you're living in that kind of country, there's starving people in Venezuela, there's starving people in Zimbabwe, there's starving people in Iran. If you live in that kind of country and you can't say anything about it, you stand for white nationalism too. It's not just that Trump stands for white nationalism, it's Biden stands for white nationalism. It's not just the Republican Party, it's the Democratic Party. It's both parties representing interests that don't necessarily correspond with our interests as a people. And that's what we're looking at. And so the African People's Socialist Party, we're a revolutionary organization. We make no bones about it. We don't believe, have no faith in at all the ability of America, the American government, the whole international capitalist system that was born through the enslavement of Africans and the colonization of the vast majority of the peoples of the world. We don't believe that this system has any redeeming qualities, nor can it respond to our needs and aspirations. It treats us just like what we are. It treats us like a conquered nation, living under foreign and alien domination and by the rules that have been imposed on us by the foreigners and the aliens who have conquered us. That's how it treats us. And Africa is starving. It's the richest continent on the planet Earth. Africa is starving. African people are starving, and the rest of that. And so we recognize that. But what happened was that Black people, our people, fought a magnificent revolutionary struggle. We have never, 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 never capitulated to white power. We have never voluntarily accepted being dominated by a foreign and hostile alien people. We fought from the very first time a white man put his foot on the continent of Africa and tried to force an African to do something against our will. We fought. We have always fought. And up until now, we've fought. We fought in Ferguson. We fought in various places and continue to fight up to now. So there's no question about that. But in the 1960s, we suffered a major fundamental defeat. A revolution did. Malcolm killed, King killed, Black Panther Party destroyed. Most of the Black revolution of the 1960s wiped out. The organizations destroyed. The people were thrown into prison. Some people are still political prisoners, been locked up since that time. And then the imposition on our community of a hostile, of a drug economy. They made it impossible for us to be able to live and to make a living and to get work in the legal capitalist economy. And they put an illegal capitalist economy in our community. So we had the drug economy placed on our community. Then we had these persons, neo-colonial, we call them neo-colonial, they're petty bourgeois, certain kinds of middle-class forces who were raised up by white power and declared our leaders after they killed Malcolm, after they killed King, after they wiped out members of the Black Panther Party, after they killed Lawrence Mann, co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party. They raised these persons up and said, these are the leaders. These are the ones who speak for Black people. And since that time, they destroyed our agenda. They minimized the significance of the agenda that had been achieved through the Civil Rights Movement, through the Black Power movement, through the Black Panther movement. Then we don't have an agenda of our own that's out there. Then they say you got the right to vote in 65. This is the same time frame that they're killing off our leaders. 65, they passed the Civil Rights, the Voting Rights Act that allowed African people the right to vote after they've killed and while they're in the process of killing and destroying the organizations and the programs that you would vote for. Then they put these neo-colonial pacifists, these pacifiers in place and said, these are the leaders. And so what we have now, the only thing we have now is the Democratic Party, which has never, ever, ever in its history been a revolutionary party. And we've got Africans who are attached essentially to the Democratic Party that's supposed to represent us. And our program doesn't exist. The 10-point program of the Black Panther Party doesn't exist. The 7-point program of the Hunter Militant Organization doesn't exist. The politic and positions and programs that were put forth by Malcolm X, they don't exist. Only thing that exists is the Democratic Party and its program. And so they had pushed us squarely out of political life. And that's where we find ourselves now, right now, at this very moment. Some people are terrified about what's going to happen. They destroyed our organization. So there's a sense of not being connected to our own power to be able to defend ourselves from what they have imposed on us. This is where we are now, with the assumption that since the Democratic Party didn't put it on the agenda, there's nothing there for us. Or although the Democratic Party did put something on the agenda that was not satisfactory, we have to accept that. We're trapped with what is characterized as the lesser of two evils, and that we characterize as the evil of two lessers. And the evil, of course, is a social system, the system itself that was born through slavery and colonialism, the system itself that got its founding, its origin in selling our grandmamas, the system itself that rests upon the bloody grave of indigenous people, many of whom were called Indians and things like that, living in concentration camps even today. And of course, the Mexican people who living behind this border that they just created. This is the world that they created. This is what many people feel like we're trapped with, but we ain't trapped. Because the Republican Party didn't put a program together for us, despite the fact that they wanted more African men, I'm told, in terms of the polling, than they've seen in a long time. And the Democratic Party didn't put together a program for us. But that doesn't mean we're helpless, that we can't have our own program, that we shouldn't have our own program. And what we are saying is that we do have a program. And the African People's Socialist Party, we have a program. There's a 14-point program you can locate. You can go to APSPUhuru.org, the African People's Socialist Party. You can see our program. But there's another program that's really important. This is the one that I'm promoting right now. This is a unifying program that doesn't require somebody to be the kind of revolutionaries that we are in the party, because we believe that this whole system has to be overturned. But we also believe that in order for that to happen, masses of our people have to be brought into political life on our own terms, and have to be able to believe in freedom for Black people, not and an unconditional freedom for Black people. That's what we have to fight for. And so we played a role, the African People's Socialist Party, in creating in 2000 and 2009 the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. We played a role because we want to win the majority of African people, the majority into this process of fighting for our freedom, whether they call themselves revolutionaries or not, if they could agree to some basic principles of freedom for Black people on our own terms. That's what we played a role in doing. And so this Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, it had the first demonstration, the first national demonstration at the White House against the Obama regime. We did that just a few months after he was there, because we saw his program and it didn't speak to us. And we had asked that program of him, that question of him, August 2008 in St. Petersburg, Florida, in a mass rally that he was having. What about the Black community, Obama? Answer that question. And that's the first time anybody saw Obama stutter, because he had a program that did not speak to our interests at all. And I don't care if it makes you pissed off or not. That's the truth. And so he couldn't address that question. But we can address that question. And so we got as many organizations as we could. Right now, there are 17 organizations that are part of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. 17 different organizations. 17 organizations that are united around a general program. Wasn't something that I went into a closet and wrote myself. It was a program that was created in 2016 as a consequence of using that whole year, mostly, to have state conventions in 11 different states, state conventions, Black people, state conventions in 11 different states, and then a national convention in Washington, D.C. itself, where we rolled out a national Black political agenda for self-determination. And that's what I want to talk to you about. That's your agenda. That's our agenda. The Democratic Party didn't go to all these communities and hold these conferences and things like that for you to come to talk about Black people, Black power, reparations, et cetera. We did that. Black people did that on our own terms. And this was before the election of Trump. This was before they murdered Mike Brown in Ferguson, St. Louis. This was before they killed George Floyd and so many of the other comrades that we are concerned about, just in terms of how vicious this social system is. We were beginning this process of pulling together, uniting ourselves together, because that was one of the missing factors when they didn't just kill Malcolm, they didn't just kill King, they didn't just kill Panthers, they killed programs, they killed the basic organizational and ideological and political principles that held this community together at this time when we were engaged in this serious struggle against white nationalism. Now we're back again. And some people are saying, well, the only thing you can do is pray that a good white man gets elected. And what we're saying, that's not true. Because even if Biden goes to the presidency, when you have an election this close, with this many white nationalists coming out and saying that they support all the opposition to African freedom, that they support building walls and keeping people's land, that they support making war against the oppressed peoples around the world. And when you have that kind of situation with so many white people having united with that, you're in trouble. No matter who is elected. You think Biden's going to protect you? You think the American government, the same American government that put $1 million extra on the bounty on the side of Shakura's head, you think the American government is going to protect you? We have to be organizing to protect ourselves. And what that means really is that we have to have our own program, our own agenda, so that if Biden is elected or Trump is elected, it's not over. That we have the ability to push forward with our own agenda, wherever it is that we're located, whatever kinds of organization we have or need to create where we're located. This gives us the incipient agenda that we need to represent the interests of our people. And I just want to share that with you very quickly. And because part of this too is our call to you to come to Washington, D.C. I don't know what the outcome of this election is going to be. But on November 7th, Saturday, November 7th, hundreds of us are going to be at Malcolm X Park, and we're going to march on the White House. And then we're going to have a rally there. And the theme of this march and this rally is Black Power Matters. Democratic Party can't say that. Black Power Matters. Down with colonialism. Black community control of the police. That's on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we're going to have a conference where we're going to discuss these issues and help people be able to comfortably take on these questions that's confronting us as a people, as Black people, as African people. These are the kinds of issues that we need to have a grip on, that can advance our struggle, that can move us forward. These are the kinds of questions that the Democratic Party will never, ever, ever be able to entertain with any seriousness, nor will any of the other parties. We have to have our own independent capacity, and that's what the Black is Back Coalition, 17 organizations strong. And by the end of the day, on Sunday, we will probably have more organizations than that. And this is what really helps us to say that this is a significant program, this agenda, because it has been embraced by 17 different organizations. And the African People's Socialist Party that I head, of course, we have our own program. We have our own philosophy. But there are others who are there with philosophies that are not the same as ours, that they have been able to unite with this basic program that unites the African nation and put us on a revolutionary trajectory to change our relationship to America so that we don't have to live in fear every 4 years, hoping the right white person or the right Negro gets elected, that we can take charge of our own lives, our own affairs. We recognize that we engage in a protracted struggle. It's going to take a while. That's not going to be determined. I don't care what anybody says, our future will not be determined by what has occurred in terms of this election. I'm going to share with you quickly. This is the declaration that was written to accompany the National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination. And it reads, a critical moment in our history is upon us. In addition to the traditional centuries-long destitution and political repression that has characterized our existence and distorted virtually all our intra-communal relationships within the US, there is now an escalation of police and other white violence directed at our people that demands a coherent response. This was in 2016 that we were saying this. And it could have been written yesterday. It could have been written today about the reality we are confronted with. The entire world is in a state of turmoil. The vast majority of the world's population that experiences poverty and cruelty as normal features of life is in a state of rebellion. Because the world capitalist system owes its existence to the enslavement of our people and colonial domination of much of the world, capitalism rests uneasily on a fault line of oppression. The historical oppression of our people stems from this cruel fact of history. Like most peoples of the world, we trace our current conditions of existence to the birth of the capitalist system at the expense of our happiness and human and material resources. We recognize the escalation of terror against Black people that includes state and popular attacks and police and civilian murder. We understand that the prominent expressions of white nationalism revealed through the electoral process to select a new president of the United States are due to the growth of resistance among oppressed populations of the world and within the US. We recognize that the apparent social peace within the US over the past 35 years or so has been illusory, a product of the successful brutal assault by the US government on the struggles of Black people for justice and power in the 1960s. Our movement was obstructed by state-imposed repression that included the political murders of important leaders from our community. Among these leaders were Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, and others. The false sense of social peace during this last period also depended on the disruption of the then developing Black agenda that demanded peace, democracy, and an end to poverty, political oppression, and the acquisition of Black power. The US government and its millions of appointed or anointed Black leaders have contributed to a defeated outlook among our people that reduces our struggle to vain attempts to influence the two major ruling parties, to include the interests and aspirations of our people in the otherwise ruthless, terror-inducing imperialist agenda they normally represent. The US government's assault on our independent movement for Black political power has created a worldview that promotes the US electoral process as the only viable means of forging and pursuing an agenda favorable to our interests. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations does not believe that our future should be in the hands of any institution that does not have its origin within our own community and has not been forged through the struggles of our people. Black people, therefore, are gathering to consolidate our own national Black political agenda for self-determination. With our national Black political agenda for self-determination, we claim responsibility for our own future, independent of the Democratic and Republican parties or any other organization or institution external to our community. We are fully aware of the long history of betrayal of our people by both parties and refuse to submit our destiny to a slavish dependency on either of them. As conscious women and men, we are declaring our intent to guarantee a future for our children and generations to come by creating an independent agenda for the progress of our people. We know that the agenda is not all-encompassing. It cannot be. Our movement is in a developing stage, having been re-energized most recently by the August 9th, 2014 uprising of poor working class young people on Canfield Drive in Ferguson, Missouri, after the police murder of 18-year-old Michael Brown. We recognize that our national Black political agenda for self-determination is in contention with decisions made for us by the rulers of the US, their servants in our midst, and other African people who may have legitimate disagreements with our views. But we cannot wait. History will not permit hesitation at this critical juncture. Our people demand participation in creating the future that awaits us. This development of our national Black political agenda for self-determination is not an attempt to create a new political party or organization. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations is a coalition in the truest sense of the word. We are an organization of organizations and individuals who have chosen to unite around a common set of principles for self-determination and a conscious struggle against world imperialism. We have seen the defeat of previous attempts to create a Black agenda by prematurely creating new political formations before basic principles and organizational relationships were firmly established. That required first loyalty, that required first loyalty to our people rather than to the Democratic Party. We call on all organizations currently not affiliated with the Black is Back Coalition to join us as a part of a process that will extend the political influence of all our movements and organizations while preserving the independence of each. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations does not attempt to function as a substitute for any existing organization. We simply provide a forum, a space for the overall expansion of our struggle for self-determination beyond the capacity of most individual organizations. We can see the world created by slavery and colonialism collapsing before our very eyes. The decline of imperialist white power is visible for the world to see and experience. Not only are the heroic peoples of the Middle East, South America, and Asia engaging imperialism in heated battles for control of their sovereignty and resources, so also are our people throughout Africa, Haiti, and various other places in the world, including Europe. The struggle against colonialism has breached the citadels of Europe and the US. White people of Europe, of France and Belgium, for example, are living with the kind of insecurity that is common in the colonial territories of Africa and the Middle East, from which Europe has extorted lives and resources for centuries. We are taking up the task of developing our national Black agenda for self-determination while in the throes of a maturing resistance that is primarily a response to open police murder of African men, women, and children in Dallas, Texas, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The actions of Micah Xavier Johnson and Gavin Cosmo Long represent the clearest movement toward an armed response to African murders by US domestic military occupation forces since 1972, when Mark Essex initiated an attack on the New Orleans Police Department. Like Essex, Johnson and Long briefly exposed the vulnerability and incompetence of US police forces with their attacks on domestic military occupation forces in Dallas, Texas on July 7th and Baton Rouge on July 17, 2016. The moment is urgent, and history requires us to move decisively and without hesitation. It is within this context that we offer this national Black political agenda for self-determination for discussion and adoption by our people. And this is what we took to these state conventions throughout the United States and consolidated in November in Washington, D.C. at a national convention. And we don't have time for me to go through this, but I want to just say something about the points. The first point revolves around Black women. So with this national Black political agenda for self-determination, the entire Black or African nation declares our commitment to facilitate the elevation of African women to full, equal partnership in our struggle to create a new world of freedom and socialist democracy for a united Black community in a world shorn forever of bosses and workers and slaves and masters, and where African women will share the power to guarantee that African women are adequately empowered as equal architects of our new world. Point two, the Black family we address, demanding an immediate halt to the attacks on the Black family, which is a genocidal campaign rooted in the Atlantic slave trade. Three, Black community control of the police. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all domestic military occupation forces from the Black community. Four, free all political prisoners. This includes politicized prisoners who may have originally been in prison for non-political reasons, but whose achieved political consciousness after imprisonment resulted in political actual statements that were punished by specialized treatment and sometimes additional prison time. Five, roll back and end mass incarceration, free them all, in the mass incarceration that has resulted in 1 out of every human beings in prison being an African in the United States. Six, reparations, we want it. It's our money and we want it now. We demand reparations consistent with international norms. Seven, self-defense. We declare our human right to armed self-defense from the violent attacks by white citizens and the assaults and murders by the domestic military occupation forces that include various police organizations. Eight, nationalize the banks and end forever the rule of capital. Nine, full employment at a national minimum income. Full employment at a national minimum income. This is not some minimum wage scheme that we hear coming from phony socialists who talk about over a number of years, $15 per hour. 10, the right to housing that is safe and secure, habitable and affordable, with freedom from forced eviction and the process of redlining and the rest of that. 11, stop gentrification. Stop gentrification that's wiping our communities out throughout this country. What happened to Black Harlem? What happened to Black Washington, D.C.? 12, Black businesses must be nurtured, and we have to be protected. Those Black businesses have to be protected from the monopolies and what have you that's destroying our communities and destroying the ability of our people to be able to work also with dignity. 13, the right to free education through postgraduate level. 14, free universal quality healthcare for all by a public system that serves the health needs of entire communities as well as individuals. 15, voting rights. We believe the right to vote, to effectively express a preference for political candidates, parties, or social policies is an inalienable right. And in addition to everything else we say about that, we believe that that there should be proportional representation, that African people should have at least representation, at least that's equal to the proportion of the that we have in the population. 16, US out of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. 17, the West must pay its debt to Africa and its descendants worldwide. 18, free Palestine. 18, free Palestine. 18, free Palestine, down with Israeli apartheid. 19, climate change and toxic pollution created by capitalism must end. This is what we are calling on you to come to Washington, D.C. To work with. We come together in the hundreds, we come together in the thousands. We make our own statement and we leave there on a mission. And our mission, of course, is to take this agenda out to the rest of the world. This is not some empty Black Lives Matter or anything like that. This is a program, this is an agenda that we can work with, that we can take out to masses of our people, that we can work wherever we are. And if we want to, we can bring our organizations into the coalition. If we don't want to, we still have the framework of an agenda that at least 17 organizations throughout the United States that have come together and agreed on. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. That's this coming Saturday at the 7th at noon. We'll be there at Malcolm X Park, and we're going to march on the White House. We'll be practicing social distancing, so bring your mask and other things that you need for that purpose. And then on the next day, Sunday, we're going to have a conference with the same theme. Black Power Matters. Can you say it? Black Power Matters. Are you afraid to say Black Power Matters? Down with colonialism. Down with colonialism, which is foreign alien domination of a people by a hostile and foreign entity, another people. And then finally, Black community control of the police. Go to blackisbadcoalition.org. Go to blackisbadcoalition.org. Go to blackisbadcoalition.org and register to participate in this incredible, eventful mobilization that we're going to be having on the 7th and the conference on the 8th. So no matter what happens, no matter who the white people decide is their president, carrying out their agenda, you have an agenda. We have an agenda of our own that we can pursue, independent of any contact or relationship with the Democratic or the Republican Party. I am Omali Yeshitela. I am calling on you also to look at apspuhuru.org, apspuhuru.org. I'm Omali Yeshitela, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, leader of the Uhuru movement and the African nation, and I approve this message. Thank you.